Do you ever struggle to make your characters' conversations sound natural and engaging? If so, you're in the right place. Dialogue is a crucial part of storytelling. And it's not just about words on a page, it's about bringing your characters to life and moving the plot forward. Mastering character conversations can elevate your writing and capture and fascinate your readers. I'm going to give you 5 tips for writing dialogue that resonates with your reader. And tip number 1 is dialogue tags. Now, dialogue tags are what indicate who is speaking. Things like Sue said, and she said, and Bob said. Those are dialogue tags, the word said especially. Stick around to the end because I'm going to share one of the favorite tips that I received when I was a young writer, just learning how to write dialogue. So stick around. So one thing to keep in mind with dialogue tags is that in a scene, once you establish who's in the scene, who's talking, this is a scene between Susan and Mary, and these 2 characters are going to have a conversation in a particular scene. You indicate that with dialogue tags at the beginning of the scene, and then you may not need very many more tags throughout the scene. And so if you've already written your dialogue, you can look at your dialogue and figure out, can I drop some of the dialogue tags? Because one of the problems with writing is that authors tend to use too many dialogue tags. So eliminate as many of those as possible. And remember that if it's an obvious thing that the reader's going to know who's talking, don't say a dialogue tag. Just say the quoted speech. Another tip about using dialogue tags is the word said. So said is a word that the reader doesn't see. It doesn't distract the reader. If you are going to use a creative word for your dialogue tag, that will be noticed by the reader. Things like yelled, shrieked, whimpered, whispered. You want to use those kinds of words very sparingly. Use the word said instead. It's basic, it gets to the point, and it doesn't distract the reader. And another tip about dialogue tags is avoid using said at the beginning of a sentence. When you use that, the word said at the beginning of the sentence, it reads like a script. And so you kind of want to avoid that. But you can use Mary said in the middle of what she's saying. And what that does is it shows a natural pause in what she's saying. Tip number 2 is avoid ly words. Words like limply, harshly, sadly. These kinds of words are ways of telling. And what you want to do is you want to use your dialogue to show. You don't want to tell them, show it by what is actually said. An example of this is, "Stop pestering me," she said angrily. Instead, you just say, "Stop pestering me." And what that does is it shows us that she's angry by the words that she spoke. I want to take a minute and share with you what Dave and I have going on. We are building a supportive writing community, and we would love for you to be a part of it. You can find out more through our newsletter called The Creatives, where we share about our growing community, creative tips, episodic short stories, and lots of other things. Tip number 3 is use shorter dialogue more than monologues. Now, monologues, they do have a place, and sometimes you really want to use them, but you don't want to do that very often because shorter dialogue is more realistic and it's easier to read and easier for your reader to relate to. Tip number 4 is use dialogue to reveal the story a little bit at a time. Think of it as a trickle and not a flood. One of my favorite examples of this is from the original Avengers movie when Black Widow and Hawkeye are at the Battle of New York and they're fighting, and Black Widow turns to Hawkeye and says, This is just like Budapest all over again. And his reply is, you and I remember Budapest much differently. That is one of my favorite examples of a trickle conversation, giving backstory without giving too much. Just a hint that there is a history with these two characters, that there's something else that we don't know about, and it's enough to add intrigue and mystery because it's a trickle, and that's what you want with your backstory. You do not want a backstory information dump in your dialogue. Tip number 5 is the power of your characters saying no to each other. Tension and drama are increased when the characters are saying no to each other in one form or another. This goes back to one of the key elements to good storytelling, and that's conflict. A story without conflict is a boring story that no one wants to read. So you can use your dialogue to increase your conflict and make your story more interesting and more engaging. You can also use your characters' dialogue to have them contradict each other, and that adds conflict as well. Here is my favorite tip that I received as a young author when I was learning how to write about how to write dialogue. And that tip is to go to a local coffee shop, get yourself a cup of coffee, and take your notepad and just listen to the conversations around. Listen to what people say. Listen to the way people interact. You can pick up all kinds of really intriguing and creative ways to communicate by just listening to conversation. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will catch you in the next video.